Ladies and gentlemen, grab your drinks and popcorn. Today's feature is about to begin. Welcome to Celluloid Codswallop. Hello and welcome to this week's Celluloid Codswallop, and on this week's episode I am joined by, it's a double team we've got on this one. They are writers, producers, directors. I'm joined by Claire and Anthony Bueno, who have created a wonderful documentary film, but I'm taking up time by not letting them introduce themselves, so...
Hello.
Hello. He's Anthony.
And she is Claire.
And we are the filmmaking duo, sibling duo, really.
Yep. I'm the director, labelled as, and Claire produced the documentary Cleanin Up The Town, remembering Ghostbusters.
You have the distinction of being the first siblings I've ever interviewed on this. So... I always like to ask the question, where does your story begin? You are obviously related, but where does your story begin? Could you tell me how everything started?
Well, I think from the very beginning it was our nan.
Oh yeah,
Lily Virginia Gowdy, and she used to tell us all of her stories of when she was a child during the war, and it was growing up and, working on Spitfires. And we just used to love all of those stories. Her and her sister were both widows. And we just sat on her bed as kids listening to all these great stories. And I think from that really kind of started our love of wanting to hear other people's stories. Yeah. And then sort of cut to 20 plus years later, we kind of serendipitously fell into working together, really, as far as sort of making documentaries are concerned. Anthony had moved to London to go to film school. I'd moved to London to be a presenter and journalist, and those were decisions we came to quite separately. And through doing those, we kind of came together, and it was like, why don't we make a documentary about Anthony's favourite film, really?
So it's yes.
Can I just back you up a bit? Because you said something that was very interesting. You were saying, was it your grandmother Spitfires?
Yeah. Yes.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
Yeah, she used to do the manufacture the. Was that all of the Austin?
No, the Austin was the cars that they worked on. She worked on the grills of the cars, but yeah, she used to. I've got a feeling she worked on the propellers.
No, it was the rods.
Was it the rods?
Was it the propellers? Oh,
anyway, she worked in.
Got a screwdriver that's made from one of the rods.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. Either someone made it for someone like that, and just the screw was going to be downstairs in our little tin box of tools. Somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, that was. I always remember her telling us that.
Because we're from the Midlands originally, so she was in one of the factories. One of the women working, helping put Spitfires together. Really, yeah. I mean that. So it was quite an incredible, story that they had to tell us. And funnily enough, they also. Their mum she was a spiritualist and part of the spiritualist movement, which, as you know from seeing the film, and is where Dan Aykroyd's background comes from. I mean, not that we're trying to compare ourselves to Dan Aykroyd, but there is a correlation there within the sort of spiritualist movement, and that kind of ignited this interest in the paranormal and the spooky stories that she used to tell, because there were weird things that she would say about what would happen to them and stuff. So it was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was, and we've always loved that aspect of things. So it really kind of laid that groundwork for what, we became, like, everything we kind of put into the documentary and stuff like that. Ghostbusters was, I saw it originally at the cinema back in '84, as did Claire.
Yeah.
So it was, and it's always been with me since, and started getting into supernatural bits and bobs and things. So yeah, it was just like years later when we started to do the filmmaking stuff. It was just like, you know, we'd been involved in other things. It's like, well, you know, why don't we have a crack at this?
Yeah.
And that's where like the doc started. Very sort of like naive, where things, yeah, it'll be fine, it'll be great. That's where it all started, really.
The thing that I absolutely love when it comes to what you've done is I was probably seen as the bit of the weirdo with some of my friends, because when people would get DVDs, a lot of them would just go straight to the film. I still consume the extras. If there is a story about how a film has been made, because one of the first DVDs I ever got was Ghostbusters when it came out as there's the anniversary DVD of it.
Yeah, 15th anniversary, I think.
And the thing I went straight to, because I was just astounded when it came up with this big opening screen with the Spook Central stuff and all that, and I was like, I want to see all the behind the scenes making stuff, the deleted scenes, the stuff that wasn't in it. It always grabs my attention. So what you created was just absolute heaven for me to watch. Absolute heaven. Now, it was interesting when you talked about the spiritualism aspect with regard to family members and stuff that Dan Aykroyd also touched on. Now, I'm banned on the podcast from telling my ghost story because I have told it a lot and Gemma tells me off.
Are you allowed to tell it today?
I'm allowed to tell you. I'll tell you too. But I want to know, firstly, if you ever had any spooky things happen to you.
I have. For me, it was I'd gone to Amsterdam, and my friend and I were in Anne Frank's house, and we walked into the room where Anne Frank and her family were hiding from the Nazis. And as soon as I walked into the room, I just started to have this like panic attack. And I've never had panic attacks before. My heart was racing. I was really anxious. And I had to get out of the room. And as soon as I walked out of the room, I just went back to normal. And so when I was talking to somebody, they were saying that I had more than likely picked up the residual energy, I suppose, of the anxiety that the family would have felt while they were in hiding. But it was the most bizarre experience I'd ever had, and I've never had it since. And so that is probably the closest thing I've got to a paranormal kind of experience.
Yeah, I mean, we live next to an old castle called Berry Pomeroy. It's like a few miles just up the road between like ourselves and Totnes. And it's seen as apparently one of the most haunted in the UK. And many times gone down there, many times not experienced a thing. It's weird, and you can go there and it can be, there's times and you just don't get any kind of nothing. It's just fine. It's just a castle. Other times you can go down there and it just feels off. So there's kind of that kind of goes on. But the only thing that happened actually thinking about it, many years back, I had a crack at doing meditation, and all to enhance psychic abilities. So it was a friend of ours that used to sit in a circle and said, "Oh, you can come and do it." And it's like 20 minutes, like just kind of trying to meditate, and then you kind of sit and you talk about kind of your experiences. And the one, and most of the time, and it was fascinating on many levels, because when you start really kind of going back into your mind and trying to remember stuff, you can start pulling out details that you thought were long since forgotten. But what was interesting was that the one time there was 4 of us, and we all but one imagined a flood, and it was like the area was flooding. And mine was just like water. It was in reverse. I'm trying to remember it all now. So the water was cascading backwards over the land. This one fellow had sort of like said, well, we were here, but it was all underwater. This other person, yeah, that's exactly what I was getting. This, we're here where we are now, but it was all essentially flooded. And the other one was also, it was water, but it was a waterfall kind of cascading down. So it was weird. And it's just one of those occasions like, well, if you're around the same people long enough, you're going to start getting on the same kind of wavelength to a certain degree. So it was quite interesting. I mean, some will jump to a conclusion, oh, well, that obviously means, and I'm a bit more kind of
skeptical,
in the sense that I will. Whereas years ago, I would just accepted everything on face value. Now I'm much more kind of like, well, because there could be this, and this. But we are made up of energy as well as matter. So all of that kind of like plays a part. So it was an interesting kind of moment. And I'm glad I did all of that for a while. I can't think what happened about that in the end. I just think just everyone kind of just like broke up and went their separate ways. But yeah, that was something that happened, which was curious. So, but never, and actually in this room, don't have the chair anymore. This just like behind us. This used to be my bed. Yeah. It's my office now. It's all in another room. So, and the one time I got up at night and the chair, which is on wheels, but we're not on Earth. Thankfully, there's no subsidence where we are, even though we're on a hill. So, but the chair went from sort of like over there, and I got up in the night, and it was here. And I know because I'd have to kind of climb down out my bed, and it was in my way. And it's like, what the hell is this doing here? Because it was over there. So that was something that's...
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that story.
I've completely forgotten about it till now.
And what was your story, James?
So I will just say, sorry, Gemma, in advance.
Sorry, Gemma, but we have to know.
What will also happen is Gemma is like the one who's the best editor on this. I'll do the first pass, she does the second one, but please, Gemma, don't delete this from the thing. So it's... several years ago, when I was probably about 17, we were going, it was Christmas Day, and we'd gone to my uncle and aunt's for Christmas Day, and there was me and my mum and dad. Where my uncle lives is an old hall. It's a big old village hall, and he was giving us a tour of the house, and he took us to one of the rooms, and he was showing us a picture that they'd found in the wall when they were taking all the plaster back to try and get it more to the original stonework. And it was and it amusingly put it in like a jewelry box with the cardboard on with "Get Out" written on. And we said, well, what's the story behind this? And to give you a sense of my uncle, he was trained as a chemist, so he's very much a man of science, so it's a logical explanation. But he showed us in the box, there was a picture, it was only a small picture, and you could tell it was old because it was printed on glass. And it was a young woman, all in black, obviously a widower. And what he said had happened is when they'd moved the picture, they disturbed it, weird stuff started happening. So things started going wrong, stuff was happening in the house. You would have doors opening and closing. The doors can't easily open and close because they're on latches. So and they have no kids, and he'd always say, like, unless the cats are stretching themselves, there's no way it could open. He was telling us all about this. And interestingly, they have their bedrooms at one end of the hall. This is another room right at the far end. So he's taken us around the house, he's showing stuff, and you get to one room at the furthest end of the house, one of the bedrooms. It's a lovely room, it's all appointed, but you do get a weird feeling when you go in. Anyway, he's telling us about stuff, telling us about bits of furniture he got, Jacobean furniture. Anyway, my aunt comes into the room, and I can feel she stood next to me, and she's neither of them are particularly tall, but I can see her out the corner of my eye, and I can feel her stood next to me, and I can tell it's her because she's dressed in black. I turned, there's nobody there. And I would have put money on the fact there was somebody there. Anyway, as the day goes on, gets to the end of the evening, and my dad says, right, we're going to go. Can you go and get all the coats? Now, the room all the coats are in is that room. So I go upstairs, and I remember standing at the end of the hall, and I'm getting tense. And I thought, for God's sake, just get a grip on yourself, get the coats. Anyway, I went into the room, and I've never ever had this before or since, but when they talk about the hackles going up on the back of your neck, I don't just mean it's cold.
No.
It's the proper, caveman instinct.
Yeah.
And I literally just grabbed the coat and left. So it's many years on, and I was talking to my uncle when he came last year it was, to discuss some stuff, and I said, I have interest, how are things going with the ghost? And he told me a very interesting story, which was this. They'd had friends staying over, and the ghost had been opening and closing the door to the living room. Anyway, later on, my uncle goes to the door after their friends had left, and he's there. He was playing with the door handle, going, come on, ghosty, come on, ghosty. Rattling it, nothing happened. He went and sat down. And there's him and his wife in the room, and the door opened and closed itself.
No way.
But there's even one more he told me. So I think he was making the bed, and his wife was in the hallway painting. And he's making the bed, and here's my Aunt Christine go, "Ian, stop it." And he's like, "What?" Okay, so he carries on tidying up, and she goes, "Ian, I've told you, stop messing about, stop it." So he comes out and he goes, "What are you on about?" She goes, "Look, just stop messing about, stop it, I've told you." And he goes, "I'm in the bedroom, you're in the hallway, what can I have done?" And she said, "You've been pulling on my shirt." And the room she was near to in the hallway is the room where the
that room. I've gone all goose pimply.
Now, I don't see it as being a malicious ghost, but what it clearly doesn't like is change.
Yeah. Yes, good point.
Blimey.
I think it's very interesting. I think all of this is, there's got to be something in it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a story on Nan, and I remember seeing this. So Nan was in the garden, where she always liked to be. And I remember seeing her, and she kind of like, she wasn't massively agile, but she kept going, but she kind of like turned around like this. And I was probably just watching telly, or I'm probably watching Ghostbusters on the telly, to be honest. But anyway. And she came in, she goes, "It's the strangest thing." It's like, "What was that?" It's like, "Well, I just felt this hand on my shoulder and someone say, like, it's like, take it easy or don't work too hard." And I turned around and there was no one there. I saw her turn around.
Oh my God.
It was like something like that. Take it easy or don't. Yeah, I was like, bloody. I said, well, there was nobody there because I'm sat here and I could see out in the garden. I mean, it's a bit more bushy now, our garden. But at that time, you could see all the way down. It's like, so
I never knew that.
Yeah, I remember her saying that and stuff. And she was, again, tell us the stories of like our grandparents, going to the spiritualist medium church and things that they'd be told. And the one house that they stopped in, I think the one house they stopped in was haunted, and they ended up leaving or doing a moonlight flit on the place. One place was quite tall with a banister. Yeah. And Nan, H, and Liz.
Her Les.
Oh, was it Les? There's the youngest.
The youngest brother. It was the three of them. Nan and the sister and Harriet and.
Who was the youngest? I thought Liz was the youngest sister.
No, Liz was the eldest sister.
Oh. So they always go down the banister, slide down, and the spiritualist church, the fellow sort of like one of the mediums there said, right, you've got 3 kids, blah blah blah. She goes, right, well, there's a problem with that banister, and it's going to break, and they're going to fall, and they're going to kill the youngest. So you got to get him to pack that in.
Len was the youngest.
Oh, Len, okay.
Len was the youngest boy, yeah.
So the old girl, as she was called, so we went back. She's like, right, you 3, I know what you've been doing here, sliding down the banisters, and apparently they were all kind of looking at each other like, who's grassing each other up here? Yeah. It's like, well, there's a problem, and you're going to fall, and you're going to kill Len, whoever the youngest one was. Yeah. And they went to the top of the banister, and there's a huge crack going along the top of it.
Yeah.
Which was ready to go, and they never slid down again, and that was it. But it was like,
yeah. Wow. So those were the stories that we were brought up on.
Well, part of one of the essence bits of the doc we were going to do, which we probably put in the second one more, was interview famous people that remember Ghostbusters and all that kind of stuff. And the one we did interview was Kieran O'Keefe, Dr. Kieran O'Keefe from Most Haunted, and really lovely fella. And
parapsychologist.
Yeah. So and a parapsychologist because of his love of Ghostbusters. So. But, he's kind of, I mean, obviously he comes very much from sort of like science, but it is interesting when you discuss with him some of the mechanics and some things that are clearly false, but some of those things that they walk that line between, well, this is slightly harder to kind of explain in any kind of rational way. So, and he had different kind of stories about different things, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's,
And I think that's what, with the doc, what's, why people sometimes they ask us, why do you think Ghostbusters has kind of endeared and why it's lasted the test of time? And for me, one of the kind of key factors is because it comes from a place of truth. Dan Aykroyd does believe in the paranormal. His family were seeped in that spiritualist movement. And so when it comes from that as a foundation, you can build all this fantastical stuff around it and get scared with all the different things and add the fictional elements to it. But ultimately, he told a story because he believes in the paranormal. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I think it was important for us to set the documentary up to tell that in the beginning, so we could then sort of go on explain the rest of what happens, in the making of Ghostbusters, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I'm always interested to know, obviously, you career-wise, about getting onto this path. But what was it you wanted to do when you were young? What was your dream job?
I always wanted to be a writer and a journalist.
I wanted to be a milkman.
Oh, you did as well.
I was very practical as a child.
You wouldn't have had half the stress you've got now.
I was pretty right. I'd be out of a job. That's what I'd be, because I don't have them anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I've been working at the recycling plant, recycling the plastic milk bottles. But I remember being the doctor's surgery. It was like that or a postman. And they laughed. It's like where everyone's like, I want to be an astronaut. And over this, it was like, man, that's unlikely, to be quite honest. So I went for a very, very practical approach. It wasn't until I was much more into adulthood and I was thinking, I'm going to be a Ghostbuster. That's it. I actually did think of that. I remember talking about that. I said, yeah, I want to do that. And, well, you got to go to university and you've got to study and you've got to do this. And Kieran really followed that path.
He did.
I mean, I academic and stuff like that, so it wouldn't really work for me. But he really followed the path that was exactly what I thought about when I was young. It's like, yeah, well, if I went to uni and did, Dr. Bueno, I could do that. But it never quite materialised. And it was, and I never entertained doing filmmaking. It just seemed completely, unobtainable in every shape, way or form. There's those that sort of like say that, there wasn't the resources there. But they went off and they bought a camera and they did this and did that. And I never did those kind of things, not when I was really young or even like it was into my early 20s. I think I bought a camcorder because some friends discussed about, oh, yeah, you could do this. Like we used to love watching Peter Jackson, and you see the kind of some of the early films. It's like, yeah, we could do that. Well, yeah, definitely. Yes, have a go. Of course, they were hopeless. And I'm very much someone that needs to kind of like work with people. And I was like listening to interviews with filmmakers recently, but some of them aren't. They was crap to get like Peter Jackson, grab a camera and come up with an idea and go and film it. And so it was just one of those things that just went out. And academically, I was shocking. So it wasn't until I went and worked in computers. Yeah. And then which just kind of happened more by chance. And Claire worked there. And
yeah, we were both in computing. As much as like I wanted to be a journalist as a child, I didn't actually do it until I was well in my 30s. I had another career in IT as we both did, and I just fell out of love with that, and I wanted to just follow my passion. Yeah,
that was it. And it was, I did a course. I'd been working there for a few years, did a course and quite enjoyed it. And it was just because I knew something and I had that groundwork. Whereas like if I went to college or anything like that, it was mainly doing stuff that I had absolutely no experience in before. And so I was just lost. But doing something that I kind of knew a bit about that I could build on, I quite enjoyed that. I enjoyed. Ended up the fella teaching me was an extra on Holiday on the Buses.
Oh, really?
I was like, oh, really? Oh my God, what an amazing thing. He goes, oh yeah, you can see me in a few like scenes and stuff. It's like, oh, that's quality. And it was just, I saw an advert in Empire for New York Film Academy and a course going in London. And then the summer courses. It's like, ooh, I don't mind having a go at that. And then took a couple of months off, did the course, loved it, took a year off, took a sabbatical at work, did the full year course and just never didn't go back. Just carried on like doing film or media in some shape, way or form since then. It was just the best thing I ever did. Wasn't easy at all.
It's not been easy.
But I think about like the old day job. It's like
yeah, it does send you cold.
Well, if you ever want to train in parapsychology, the degree is actually to get a doctorate at Edinburgh University, because I have looked at it.
Really?
I don't think I could. I honestly don't know if I could do it, but I was just intrigued by it. I was telling somebody in one of the old jobs I'd did. I used to work in housing, and I said, we really should consider looking at doing this as a degree. And yeah, it's a degree in parapsychology, doctrine. So who knows? Maybe in the future it's something I could potentially look at pursuing.
Yeah, I mean, even have a look at open whether they offer open universities.
I know Kieran does do it.
Yeah, he does.
He does his course, and that's all through Sparks. But I think most things you can do remotely, especially now after everything
after the pandemic.
There's a ton of stuff, and I seriously looked into it as well. I thought, doing all of that, and then some of the first things we did was, we did a show about past life regression.
Yeah,
that was like one
pilot,
of the, I think the first thing that we actually did. There was that and a Boney M thing. Nothing ever amounted to anything, I hasten to add. The Boney M thing was kind of cool because it's like a bloody, me and Liz Mitchell, she was really good.
Rah, Rasputin.
She's got a voice. She has. We recorded her in Reading. She was amazing.
Yeah.
And like the fellow that we worked with, it's like, I've got a friend, and he's like, his sister works as a set designer, and her name, what's her last name? Sue Hutchinson, some of those, but she worked on Bond and Batman Begins and all of these kind of things. She was having a chat with her about indie films and features, and she goes, well, indie, you can do anything, but you just don't have the money, whereas the big films, she goes, there, you've got all the money, but you are restricted. But it's like this, she worked on Die Another Day, and she goes, if you like the DNA lab, if you see these, like they've got all these very fancy lights, and I think she goes, they were semi-transparent bins from Bastin's or something like that she just put a hole in, put the light in, and that's the futuristic lights that they use. So she goes, yeah, that's all we use. And she did this thing with material and pinned it and made this amazing backdrop. And it was again, anything you do with this can be such a learning curve, and you kind of remember how people work and how they treat you as well, because that's also a big part.
Yeah, it's really important to treat people right.
Yeah, because we've all been on the both sides of all of that.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
But yeah, the past life thing we did was quite interesting. So yeah, even then we was just like, ghosts. I love ghosts and I love films now. So I've always loved films, but making them just. It's like, oh God, digital cameras! What an invention!
Yeah. The rest is history.
Yeah, digital is like has its curses, but
it does certainly have its benefits opposed to sort of trying to use film. So for both of you, who would you say has been your biggest influences when it comes to the work you've done?
Oh gosh, I would say as interviewers go and presenters, journalism, Michael Parkinson was a big influence on me, and my kind of motivation really, when I remember interviewing Sigourney Weaver for the doc, that I could be ranked up there. I wanted to be ranked up there with the best people that she'd interviewed. I don't know whether I achieved that, and I don't really want to ask her. We got on very well with her. I think we should be grateful for small mercies. So for me, Michael Parkinson was a big influence, and George Clooney as a filmmaker has been quite an influence for me.
Yeah,
as well.
Back in the early days, I always said Peter Jackson and Robert Rodriguez, because it was just. I remember sitting and watching Lord of the Rings and because I still love Lord of the Rings. It's just that era, and it probably still stands that way now. I thought they were the best example of modern filmmaking, the way that you've got digital and old school kind of techniques, and the way he was able to kind of blend the two. And it just went back to like what I was saying, like that camcorder and watching his early work. And we gotta have a go doing something like that. It'd be all right, love. And to go from kind of like thinking that, because I would see any other film like Sam Raimi stuff or like Spider-Man or Ghostbusters or Indiana Jones or Star Wars, and I'm watching these making ofs and thinking that's fascinating how they did that, but how on earth they know that? But I don't know that. I don't know how they do. I couldn't do that. But there was like someone like Peter Jackson that's made these like weird little dodgy little horror films that are just classics, and thinking I could do that. But it's like, if I was to work at it for 10 years like he's done, and he's gone from doing those dodgy to like the biggest films of certainly at that era of all time. Mm-hmm. It was just that kind of, but if he could do it, then why not me? So it just becomes, and then you find that you don't have to be exactly like those people. You just, because everyone has their own little thing that they become that little niche little expert in some respects. There's things that I know that maybe he doesn't.
Well, thanks to all the people that we spoke to on the documentary that taught us. Because I mean, that's the thing as well that was important for us when we made the film, was that we used as much as we possibly could the practical techniques and in-camera techniques that they discussed with us and showed us what to do, and apply that into making our own film.
Yeah,
I mean, that was really important as well.
It was, yeah. We did. We learned a lot from those people that we met, and wanting to pay some kind of tribute or homage to the work that they've done.
Yeah.
So, but it was just we took a lot from that. But with Robert Rodrigo, back to him, it was his sort of like
Full Tilt Boogie as well.
Yeah, he did like Full Tilt Boogie, which was a cracking documentary. Like, was like at that time, because obviously there's been others since. I just thought it was the best making of doc, because it gave you kind of warts and all kind of, it showed you sort of like, there was the highs and the lows and trade disputes or something like that going on while making it. It's like, you never get this on, you'd always get like a DVD, and I, same as you, loved the stuff, because it was like all of a sudden there's all this information. You'd sit with the audio commentaries like you sat with people in the room listening to. I loved I think it was The Thing or not, or Escape from New York, and John Carpenter and Kurt Russell just having a laugh, thinking, God, what can you imagine being in the room with them? It'd be a blast. So, but Full Tilt Boogie was just like, that's a really good doc. It was so insightful. And then there was the Blade Runner one, which is just so thorough. And so they were the ones, and the appendices of on Lord of the Rings. But what Robert Rodriguez did was just show that how accessible to make stuff. You didn't have to have all the gadgets and millions. You could actually do it quite cheaply. And when digital became a thing, it's like, well, look at this. This is what you can now do with digital cameras. Like, it just all of a sudden became accessible, where it's like up until that point was completely inaccessible.
And I think he was he not editing as well on Final Cut?
I don't remember. I don't know if Final. Maybe he did. I don't know.
I'm sure it was.
The Coen brothers did.
Yeah, maybe it was them. Maybe I'm.
But Final Cut was, Apple just. Yeah. It was still £1,000 and £900, £1,000, but it wasn't. Avid. I still can't use Avid. I still can't get my head around it at all. But Final Cut and Premiere, I could use it. We was taught how to use it, but it was just like, okay, this all makes sense. I get it. So again, all of a sudden, getting something on a camcorder, for example, and film it. It was like, but now what do I do with the footage? Now I've shot something. I don't know how to edit this stuff. And I didn't know where you could go to get that kind of information. Of course, now we live in a world of YouTube, and it's like, this is how you do this, 3-point lighting. Oh, okay, and all that kind of stuff. So we really do live in such a vastly different world.
Yeah.
And it's from that point, like, was it mid-90s where digital started and they did the Dogma films? It's kind of where we are now. It's 100 years prior to that, celluloid, and it was what it was, and tape-based stuff. But you couldn't afford it. Now most people in their pockets have got cameras for infinitely more powerful than what you sort of like had when they first started releasing those kind of things. Even like the high 8 and 16, really. So different worlds.
That is very true, because one of the things that I'm a big fan on film-wise, obviously Ghostbusters is clearly in there. I know very few people who don't like Ghostbusters, but it was like the work of Kevin Smith, and he was one of the people who, when he basically went as somebody who didn't have any huge background in filmmaking and has managed to make these series of films. If you look at the way Clerks was originally put together, it's a brilliant template for influencing future filmmakers. It's also influencing future, people who've gone into podcasting, i.e. me and the people I'm with, because Kevin Smith's podcast was the thing that united a lot of us who were working and wanting to make podcasts. So the question I'm going to ask is, you decided to make a documentary. What was the reason you chose Ghostbusters? What's your history with the film?
It's just my favourite.
Just your favourite film of all time, isn't it?
Yeah, just loved it, and it was as simple as that, really. When I was at film school, and they'd say, what's your influences? What's your favourite films? And it was always like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, or like Pulp Fiction or Citizen Kane, which I hadn't actually seen at that point. and all these, and they always like some, typically kind of in vogue kind of like filmmaker. And I was like, Ghostbusters. And I remember my teacher kind of laughing really. I said, it's for me, that's a perfect film. I go into the cinema to have a great experience, have a fun film, proper escapism, come out feeling great and thinking I really enjoyed that. So that's exactly what I want when I go to the cinema. So, and it was just, wasn't anything like the first film I ever saw at the cinema or something like. It was just went to see it at the cinema. I think my dad took me. Claire saw it first.
Yeah.
And just captured me. And it wasn't as if like, oh, that's it, I've seen Ghostbusters and I'm not going to like any other film, because, Back to the Future came out the following year, which I also greatly enjoy. But, it's always stayed with me. I've always, like, first thing on the internet, when the internet became a thing, is like, how do you build a proton pack? And look, what's the top, worldwide top 10, where does Ghostbusters sit? And it was like number 8 or 9 at that point, I think. So it's always been there. So when we started to get involved in doing media kind of stuff and Blu-rays and and DVDs, it was like, doing making ofs, that'd be an awesome thing to do. Going on sets, what a cracking thing to do. So when it was just like, oh, okay, I can see that people are making these kind of docs now, and we was involved with another one ourselves. It's like, right, I get it. And it's going beyond now what DVDs did, giving you like 15 minutes, like with filmmakers, which you never had before. This is like a full-on thing, like Mark Kermode did basically with the Fear of God documentary, the Exorcist one. And it's like, okay, and that was it. And it was like, I don't think there was any other film that was like, Claire, should we do Ghostbusters for me?
You just came to me, didn't you, and said, if we needed Dan Aykroyd. And so, he's the brainchild of the film. So if he doesn't want to be involved, then we haven't got a film. So the previous documentary we'd been involved with had got was a John Landis film. And so you had chosen an opportune moment, didn't you, to speak to John Landis and say, do you think Dan Aykroyd would be interested in a documentary about Ghostbusters? And he was like, yeah, sure, I can get you, Danny. I think is how you...
Exactly. It's almost if you were there.
Thank you. I wasn't, but I've heard this story a number of times.
You have indeed.
And it was literally a case of that. And, then we started to reach out to people to see whether they were interested in actually being involved. But I have to say, John Landis has been kind of very instrumental, very supportive. And, Dan was a difficult person to get hold of, and it took us 4 years to actually sit down to interview him because of logistics. We would travel to America because we're, hence that you can hear the accents, we're British, so we'd have to fly over to America to do all the filming. And for the first 8 years, we self-funded the doc. So, we'd literally go to work, save our money and go over and film these interviews. And all the time we would go over to the States, and there would be Dan Aykroyd in New York and we would be in LA. And then if we flew over to New York, it just so happened he was committed in LA, and the dates could never match. But in the end, John Landis did come to our rescue, didn't he? And just said, look, you need to speak to these guys. And sure enough, we did. But for me, Ghostbusters, going back to your original question, it was a kind of a rite of passage film for me. It was the first film I was allowed to go and see without parental supervision. I was a teenager, 14, 15. I'm going to probably give my age away there, but whatever.
Yeah,
I'm past caring now.
You would have been.
I think 15. About 15, I think I was. And so, I remember the seat I sat in the cinema, the friends that I was with being scared witless from the library ghost and jumping, in my chair. And so for me, it holds an affection in that way. But I had kind of parked it. I was somebody that enjoyed it. But for me, going back and then, Anthony taking me on this journey with him to make this film, I found a greater respect for the film because of interviewing all these people who have been amazing, very, very generous, not only with their time, but a lot of them lent us props and allowed us to use imagery that they own. And so it, for me, has become a very special film because it's a part of me now. It's been 15 years of my life.
Yeah.
You know, I could have had a child and grown up and, you know, about to leave school. Yeah, so it's our big baby.
I mean, it is a phenomenal documentary. And I was thinking, it was just interesting when you were reflecting on the impact Ghostbusters has had for you, that it's been in your life. I was thinking for myself, actually, the same thing. It's something from when I was a child. It's always something that's been there. It's always been something I've enjoyed. And then I think probably it really kicked into high gear for me about 3-4 years ago when I went to an event where the people who actors who've been in the film were there, and then you get to meet the other people who are fans. And I've been lucky enough to interview some people who've been involved with the Ghostbusters films. So it is something that I think it's one of these films that once it gets under your skin, it never goes away. But I do remember something that was, and I'd just love to hear your take on this, something my father once said, which was, if someone had come to you to pitch a film and say, we're going to make a comedy about ghosts, people catching ghosts, probably shouldn't work, you know, as an idea. It sounds really bizarre that it shouldn't work, but it, of course, went on to be, for a very long period of time, I think the most financially successful comedy ever made in history. I mean, I can imagine that there must have been a hell of a lot of challenges to making this documentary. And it was probably, we could spend hours probably just on that alone. But what would you say is the biggest challenge that you had making it? And not to go negative, we'll look at the greatest, most successful thing from it.
Oh gosh, I think
getting it finished
was the biggest challenge, wasn't it? Definitely.
Yeah, which was an immensely complicated task in the end.
Yeah.
And purely because we just didn't know that process.
Yeah.
And, you know,
because I think people don't realise it was our first film.
Yeah, it's our first film. So it's sort of, you know, it's one thing, you know, making YouTube videos and or doing a little bit for somebody and doing a bit of there, or even working on films to be you know, short independence and stuff. But you kind of do your job and off you go, and then the rest of it is you actually don't think there's another problem there to be going over. But it was really, I mean, it was a long task because obviously we needed to get all the interviews. And we had lots of ups and downs with that, and we did a Kickstarter after 8 years because we just drained any kind of financial resources that we had. It was the only way to kind of carry on, and that got us to get at least get the filming done. We're supposed to do everything, do the whole post, but as we found, when you're going from your little kind of personal project that I'll probably, you know, it'd be a nice little, very expensive home movie that we made to, you know, we're going to, no, we can actually, I mean, I remember Claire saying, this could go into cinemas and this is going to go and this and that. It's like, no, it's not. These type of things don't do that. And whether that was true or not back then, it certainly isn't now. It's the world has changed. So we did get it into cinemas, but you just can't make something and put it in the cinema, as it turns out. There's all these like legal processes you have to go through. And that ended up taking like months, if not a year or so, because we'd finished it.
It was like in
I'm trying to think of the year.
2018. 2018.
2018. So it's like, I think we like kind of finished the edit pretty much 2017, 18.
Yeah.
Apart from a few motion graphics, we knew that the edit was finally there, you know, and because things change, you start adding on images and then you can tweak it and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that going backwards and forwards, but we were finished with a version that was like, this is it. I think this is it. We got it.
Yeah.
And reached out to someone that we knew who was a co-producer and who'd done docs like this before and got sales agents do things. So that was a really, really difficult process. Because all of a sudden, sort of like, you know, conforming.
Yeah.
And I'd heard about like online and offline editing, and I basically understood what it was. And then it was like I really needed to know what it was. So we'd done the offline edit, but you have to hand it over to somebody or me to do an online edit, and it's basically making sure that film, everything is legally compliant, that everything is the right. I mean, if you're shooting a film, everything's shot in the same frame rate, it's not a big deal. Something like this, you got, you know, we had hundreds of motion graphics, and all the interviews were shot exactly the same, so that was good. And then you got old footage that you're bringing in or anything like that, and everything has to be exactly the same frame rate. And that was something we just didn't even worry about, because the computer, you shove it in the computer and it all works. And
it renders out and it happy days.
So, well, looks lovely. That's it. When you watch it on a cinema screen, you can see there's huge problems with that.
And that, yeah.
So that was a huge task to get, just for me. And it was great next time round. On the next time, half of that we won't even need to worry about, because it's like, right, we'll do that right off the bat. Anything that we've got there, anything we make, we know we make it like this and we do it like that. And all of a sudden we save ourselves like another month's worth of work. But it's, getting got to get the sound done. There's things that you just don't hear when you're sat on your computer, but you've got to make sure that it's all good, because it's going to go off
sound and whatever.
Yeah, because you do a thing called a QC, then you send it to a distributor or a sales agent, and they'll do their QC, and it's a quality check.
Yeah.
And if there's any discrepancies, they can turn around and say, well, we're not going to pay you anything now because we told you to deliver it like this. You haven't. So
you're walking a tightrope. And of course, where we were using Sony's intellectual property. So we also had to go down the legal route of making sure that we couldn't afford to pay for the footage that we used. So what we used was something called fair use. So because all the clips and the Sony images that we use are used for educational purposes and illustrative purposes. So if you've got, say, Steve Johnson and Mark Brian Wilson talking about the library ghost and its fabrication, and then at the end you show the library ghost, we're allowed to do that because we're illustrating what Mark and Steve were talking about. So that, and even things like Sigourney Weaver talking about comedy and performing comedy, and we'd use an image of Sigourney, but it wasn't her performing comedy and it wasn't in the right era. So the lawyers come back and go, you can't use that image. She's talking about performing comedy in 1983. So you have to find an image of her performing comedy in 1983. And so again, because we didn't know, we had a good idea about following the kind of the ethos of fair use and the kind of thing that would be expected of us. We had a good idea of what kind of imagery we could use and how much footage we could use, and even music. We had to be really careful about that. So there was the legal going backwards and forwards of us changing things, and then them having to start the film from beginning to end and keep checking that everything is compliant so that we can ensure the film, and so we don't get sued. That was at least 6 months.
Yeah, it was, because we had to. The plan was we were going to premiere the doc at the Sony Fan Fest thing that they did a couple of years back. That was the big thing, and we looked at the film through. It's like, it's fine. There's got to be like half a dozen things that they want changing. It's fine. And there was like 130 things that needed to change. And then also because it became, and the thing with fair use is if the company know, which we had conversations with Sony over the years, so they knew about us in the film. But if you approach them to say instead of using fair use, we'll buy that license of that bit of Ghostbusters to show within the doc, so we can do whatever we want with it. If you buy it, you can put it anywhere in the film you like, and it's not a problem. But if they turn around and go, no, you can't use that, and sorry, and that's it, you're done. You cannot use anything from there as part of fair use, because they know about it. They've already turned around and said, no, that's it. So you have to do it without their knowledge. So, and we were going to be screening it. So we were having these quite frantic phone calls with co-producers and lawyers and all that kind of stuff. It's like, we're over here. They've flown us here. We've got to show this thing. We can't show nothing. We're going to that's going to be bad. As it turns out, the event was quite disorganized, and we just kind of slipped under the radar. We showed some clips and everybody went away happy, basically. But that was unbelievably stressful.
Yeah, the last couple of years, this kind of taking the film to the international market, because the whole point of us and any filmmaker making a film, it isn't about any kind of professional vanity, is that you want as many people in the world to see your film.
See your work,
But it's not just that. Yeah, it is, and it's also all these people that dedicated their time to us, whether it was people who are working on it, people like Derek and Anthony and Jamie and Dave and all that, and that's done. We've all worked to make this film done. So you want to honour the work that they've put in, but also everyone that we've interviewed. That is sort of like, some of them hadn't been put on camera before, and if they had been, they'd never used their interview. So you owed it to them as much as to anyone else. I mean, I don't really have any kind of vanity like that. I don't mind if people enjoy it. That's amazing. I'm happy about that. But it's more about, well, these people have entrusted us, so we owe it to them. Yeah. So and when you get to that kind of stage. Yeah, that was. I mean, it was really stressful. It got some really was not fun, and didn't put us off and wanted to do more. But that was the biggest learning curve, because when we'd edited it and it was like, actually we're happy with this. It seems all right. Actually, it's got a nice flow, and so we knew how to do that. But taking it to that other stage, that is a minefield. I mean, I don't envy what people do there, but it was. Yeah, the fair use and all that. The reason why we don't have, the Ghostbusters, the Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters in it, was because the one thing we were sort of like told, you can't fair use music. That's a separate thing, but you can, as it turns out. It's really restrictive, but you can use it as fair use for exactly the same reason. So we've got some of the Elmer Bernstein score, because they're talking exactly about that. So we could have used Ghostbusters. We couldn't have used it in the one bit, I don't think, but definitely the other part we could. But we reached out to Ray and his team, and they got their own documentary coming out, or come out, or it was coming out at that point, and they didn't want a conflict, so it was like, no. And once they say no, that's it, no ifs, no buts. And we'd had a version of Ghostbusters recreated, which was really good, and that was going to be like the theme to the doc. And we just had to say, we can't use it. That's it. It's like, if he said no to that, it means any version of Ghostbusters cannot appear in it. So there was also another bit in the doc where it's the map. Yeah. Like the old SNES sort of like looking map thing. The original music over the top of that is Ghost. It's like a digitized little diddly kind of thing. It was great. And it's like, no, it can't. Ghost's got to go. It's like, Jesus. And I think you can get away with it. You I think you were like, Christ, you hadn't realised how much of you had used, because you had to sort of like with a fine tooth comb go through and remove absolutely any reference to that song. And anywhere it appeared. And the only bit where it had an impact was where Harold and Ivan are talking about John Candy, and you see him, you see from the music video go. Not having him go Ghostbusters and having that come in changed the beat of that gag, if you like, because it was that's supposed to be quite funny. You got Ivan playing it very diplomatic, and then Harold going, no, it was his agent. He's like his out agency, and it's really, with that beat of music in there and saying that, it worked really well. It was quite funny, but it just falls flat because you can't have that music on it. It was like. But other things in there work, but that was the only time when it really caused like but anyway, is what it is. Again, going forward, we just won't ask.
And was there ever a moment you were making it where you wanted to just put your head in your hands and seriously think this ain't gonna happen?
Not really.
No, not really.
I mean, there were falling outs and things like that. Yeah. Oh, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, there was.
But there was plenty of that on occasion. But there wasn't.
Him and his tantrums.
Don't worry. What I will say is, considering you're saying how stressful elements of this could be, you both look great. It's not like it's wrecked you. So you've come out of it very well.
Filters on show, obviously very, very good these days.
The other thing I've always wondered about when you're making a documentary like this, who was the hardest person to get, or the most challenging person to get to speak to?
Oh, well, I mean, the obvious person that we didn't actually get was Bill Murray, but you'll see at the end credits. I'm talking to him and asking him if he'll do the film, and he says he does. He will.
He was at a press conference.
He was at a press conference.
That was all it was, a press conference. He was there, and like, bloody hell, let's go. So it was like the third time we'd ask him, and so that's what it's not like he's walking through the street and I'm candid camera.
we weren't stalking him or anything at a golf course. Then we did think about that once or twice.
Yes, that did go
heading up to Glen Eagles or something.
Well, his brothers have got a golf course.
They have, in Florida or something, hasn't it? Yeah. So, he was kind of like the trickiest person that we didn't get, if you see what I mean. He was the trickiest person to get. You know what? The trickiest people to get were the ones that were kind of off the radar. That, like Mark Brian Wilson, who is the performer and fabricator of Slimer. For him, for instance, we had wanted to get hold of and couldn't. And because he's
he just wasn't. Well, again, different eras of things. Now, Facebook's evolved and everything else evolved with it. But at that point, there's no details about him, Terry Windell, Stuart Ziff, and people like that, and Ned Gorman, who will be in the second lot because he worked at ILM. Like all these people, and Dan was tricky, as we've already said. And that was, even down to literally like the day before that interview, because you were waiting for the phone call to say, like, I'm really sorry, you can't do it now. And we were sat somewhere and we got a phone call. It's like,
okay.
And then you picked up the phone. Hi, she goes, there's a guy it was Dan's assistant, just making sure everything's okay for tomorrow. Yeah, it is. Oh.
Thank God for that.
And I was like quiet because I was really nervous. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong right now. And that all went really well, and I was dead chuffed with it in the end. But it was that. It was those kind of people. But we just found as you interview one person and say, by the way, have you spoken to such and such? Well, no, I haven't. Who's that? Oh, well, you did. Oh, blimey, yeah, we'd love to talk to them. Okay, well, he's there. And like gives you like a list of like 5 people. Have you spoken to such and such? Well, we'd love to, but we can't find him. Oh, he's coming in tomorrow. I'll get him to come down. That kind of thing. Yeah. So it was.
And I think the people like Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, they certainly weren't easy for us to get hold of. But, Ivan Reitman's office, they had spoken to him, and they said, these people worthy of our time, and they had recommended us that we were. So we've been very fortunate that hopefully that people have found us professional.
Yeah.
We haven't overstepped our boundaries, and we're respectful of everybody. And because of that, then people recommend you. And we'd already been working as well for years. We've got a company called Premier Scene, so I'd been interviewing. We had been, haven't we, on the red carpet, interviewing a lot of well-known film talent, Hollywood film talent, and so we'd already got a certain body of work behind us as well. But a lot of people, we've just been really lucky, but we also came recommended, didn't we?
Yeah. And, and that's, it was an honour for us.
Absolutely.
When you find out, it's like, I wonder how. And they're like, oh, wow. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, blimey, really? They said that? It's like, well, they obviously don't know us very well, which is to our advantage.
Even, like Kurt Fuller, when we interviewed him, because he was in Ghostbusters 2, he'd been at an audition with Ernie Hudson, and they'd been talking about us in the audition, hadn't they?
Yeah. So it's
a small world.
There's some, and it's like I said, like that last couple of years was really tough.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from some of the things that's happened kind of in between. And all that.
So many highlights, haven't we?
There has, and there's there was just like those long lulls where we couldn't do anything because we knew we didn't have the interviews and we didn't have the money to kind of do any more trips. So it'd be like 2 years before we could do one trip or the next trip, but it was just kind of busy doing other things really. But there are just like moments where the one day we wanted to try and get Dennis Muren.
Oh yeah.
Who like head of ILM, and it's just like there's no details for him on IMDb. And we were at a travel lodge in Santa Monica, where there are a couple of scenes, Prison Break, where they go to this. It doesn't exist anymore. They yanked it down, but it was dirt cheap, especially like the location.
Prime real estate, wasn't it?
Quality.
Right on the beach.
So it was just like, well, we'll just give them let's just phone ILM. So you just there's the number. So phone number's like, yes, I'm just trying to. I don't do the phone call because I'm really nervy when I have to use the phone. I'm okay face to face, but phones I hate. So that's Claire's unique.
One skill.
So it's like,
I disagree that it would be your one skill. I'm looking at two. What's the term they use? Multi-talented thread. When I think you two.
Multitasking.
Yeah. Multitasker. So anyway, she's phoned ILM and said, "Oh yes, I'm just trying to contact Dennis Muir." And okay, no problem, just put you through. And it's like, hello, Dennis here. It's like,
it is. It's amazing when things like that happen. I mean, I got it. Obviously, I reached out to you too, and thank you so much for getting back to me.
No problem.
But it is that I can relate only on a very smidgen of a scale. But this thing of when you reach out to somebody and you get a response, and also that thing where you think to yourself, is it going to happen? Because I contacted Neil Innes, who was a musician. If you know him, he would have been he worked with the Beatles. He worked with
Yes, I know. Okay. Yeah.
I was going to see the Ruttles, which he was.
Yeah. Okay. We interviewed. Because I met him years ago, and because he's passed away now, hasn't he?
He has, yeah.
Yeah. So he sat with Jeremy Jacobs.
Oh,
do you remember there was that thing?
Yes,
so I went off and did some camera, and it was like on Neil Innes, like the fifth or sixth.
Oh, member of the
Pythons or something like that, and the duck on his. It's like I remember saying, because he always wears this. He had a little. Was it the French thingy? And he had a duck on the head. I don't know where that came from. There's a whole thing about it. And he goes, I take it you want me to wear that hat. So I gave it to him, you wear a silly hat, you're branded, you shag one sheep, and it was really funny. We had to go to his place over, I don't know, it was like Essex Way, something like near where Jeremy lived. It was great. Yeah, so the name was like, I bloody know that name. Yes, okay, sorry. So go on, yeah.
No, it's brilliant that we've actually had something, one of those link things on knowing it. But I was going to see the Ruttles with my father. My father said, he'd be a really good interview. You really should try, because I obviously had an interest in his work, and I thought, this ain't going to happen. This isn't going to be impossible. Twitter, just sent him a message. Thought, I'll never hear anything from him. Not a chance. Got a response. He said, yeah, come and see me. We'll sort something out. Went to the gig. Where I can definitely relate to that is it going to happen moment is you go in. So I had to introduce myself to the management of the bar it was at, and I was explaining the process, and they spoke to my father as well. We explained the process. They said, right, wait a minute. So they send somebody else out who's who's the guy who runs entertainment for the gig. Got to tell the story again. And they said, right, leave it with us. So me and my dad having a drink, and somebody else comes out, and it's Neil's manager. So you have to reiterate the story again. And he says, right, I'll go and have a word with him. And me and my dad were talking, and we said, this may not happen. This might not be possible. And then his manager came out and just went, no, come through. Spoke to Neil, interviewed him. Incredibly intelligent, amazing man. And I probably was one of his last interviews.
Oh.
That he would have done. But yeah.
And the thing is, it becomes a real honour that they've, bestowed their time with you, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But he was a really nice fan. I think we even had a bite to eat there. But we was there for a while. It was, I don't know what even happened with that footage, because it was a company and they wanted to do more stuff, and it was just like, there's things. It's one thing doing stuff for yourself. It's others when you do things for others, and then it's either not overly organised too well. Oh, what? Because there's that fellow who was one of those. It was a cartoonist.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
That was it, and the concept was, while the interview was happening, this other fellow's doing a cartoon of the bloke, and that's so it was Neil in this case. And I can't remember what happened about it, but it was a really nice, and it was fascinating, because I don't know if I knew of him at all at that point. And but yeah, and then learned he passed away a couple of years ago, and you think, what a shame. He was really nice. Something
phenomenally nice, man. And it was one of these moments where you sit and you realise that you are sat with someone, the intelligence is phenomenal. And that's what I remember sitting with him. I was just like, this guy, it's off the charts. But he was so humble. It was off the chart. And he was just a very nice guy. Chatted to me and my dad. Took the time. Amazing gig. So, and the fact that I would have been one of his last interviews meant a hell of a lot to me. Yeah,
absolutely. It's what an honour, really, isn't it, that they've, they've given you their time.
It is. you know, people sort of like talk about us in the doc, and there's, I think it's like 7 people have passed away since we interviewed them. Thankfully, no connection. That is the only kind of it's the only thing was going on there. But like with Harold, and when he went, and you just sort of like, this, were we the last person he talked to in depthly about these films? And he was lovely, really, and it's like the same thing. And it's like when you sit with these people, and they are sharp, they are very intelligent, but there's no kind of arrogance or pretense. They just treat you the same as anybody else.
And very disarming. I think you'd probably find the same, that you know, and it says a lot about these people who have had a certain status in the world, that, you know, you walk into the room and knowing that you're going to be nervous and anxious, and they just instantly put you at ease. You know, dare I say, you know, George Clooney, again, he's always been like that. They just instantly disarm you, and, you know, and then you can just relax and have a lovely, you know, a really lovely interview. And I think for us, you know, what happened with Harold, you start to kind of reflect back and go, if we were the last people that he spoke to at length, did he know what was going on at the time with his illness that we obviously didn't know about? So in that small amount of time, he's trusted us with his story, and we become custodians of how we then represent him. Not that we'd have represented him in any other way other than faithfully, but it just adds that extra sort of layer of responsibility, really, that, you know, that we do the right thing to tell his story as accurately as possible. Yeah.
And that's the kind of responsibility, I suppose, we all kind of like taking and doing these kind of things.
Absolutely.
And you don't realise it at the time, but when it happens, you go, bloody hell, and it does knock you for a loop. It did with me, you know, especially with Harold, because I was editing the film at that point, and I couldn't go near the doc for a couple of days because it was just like, that's, you know, he's not going to be able to see whatever it is that we were going to make. And the same with all the others, that, you know, you just hope that they were going to, like Terry was always someone else that stuck in our mind. And he was like, it was Terry and Richard that the only two we interviewed together. And again, Terry was one of the interviews we couldn't find any details. And then we're going to go and interview Richard, and he goes, oh, my friend Terry's going to be here. Did you want to interview him? Because he worked. I was like, yeah, we'll do it at the same time. It'd be great. And they were a blast. And we had a good laugh with him. And we ended up meeting him for a bite to eat after, like on another day while we were there. And he walked in and they were showing a clip from Poltergeist. He goes, oh, God, I did that scene. That's my scene I did. And he's telling you about Return of the Jedi and doing the lightning bolts coming out of the Emperor's fingers. And you're just thinking, oh, my good God. This is just like there's the little boy in me and also the fairly elder adult screaming inside right now. Because it's like they're just telling things that you've got such a deep connection to in terms of the films they are. But it's a job. Well, and actually, no, even though it is a job for them, but you can see it's still something they were passionate about. And I think that's something about Ghostbusters. And we were talking with John Bruno recently, who's in the film. So we just Skyped with him a couple of days ago, and he was saying, you know, as many did, this was a film that kind of changed my life and my career. This is where I was doing this, and then I went off and did all these other things after I did that. It's so. And that's the kind of important role that film places for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So it isn't just for the fans that have sat and watched it and loved it and now buy jumpsuits and build proton packs and all that kind of stuff. It was transformative for the people behind the lens.
Yeah.
And that is what's, I think, important about this film, is that it really, you know, and every film probably does have that. You know, some films are a disaster, but they're still important. Like there was something, The Island of Dr. Monroe, the documentary on that's fascinating for completely different reasons to what Ghostbusters is. But it's, you know, it's kind of those important tales that when you sit and talk to people and how they interact and how they do these things, in some respects isn't very different from any other kind of working environment that everybody has to work in, the office job and all the rest of the different personalities, the ones that like joking, the ones that like getting on with the job. But, you know, film, you're creating something that will be seen and recorded for generations to come. Whether people see some of those films very much is another thing. But, you know, the work that we did back in the old days of IT, that's like long since forgotten. And some of us don't even remember us now, which is a good thing, because I don't want to remember them either. But, you know, you do this type of stuff. I've got a friend, I'm rambling on about it now, but a friend who's an editor, And I think I showed him an early cut of the doc. And he says, but you've gone and done something that he says, I've worked on dozens of things, but nobody's ever going to kind of look at that and go, well, that was that. It's like either a reality TV thing he's done or something. It's like, but you've done something that you will be remembered for. And that's what we've all done, is that, it's, hopefully whatever level, people will still come and look at this and go, that's, we've done justice to those people. And there's something we've done that will kind of like make it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I mean, both looking at, when you're making Cleanin Up The Town, but also on the wider work you've done, what's been the ultimate pinch yourself moment of someone you've met or something that happened where you're thinking, where you have like an out of body experience? I got that when I met Kevin Smith. I've met a few famous people. Bizarrely, Kevin Smith is the only one where I turned to my friend and went, holy, I use language I can't use now. I've met Kevin Smith.
But it gets you like that. I always put it, because the same, we've met a lot of people, but it's there are some that you have a particular affinity to, and especially if they're people from your childhood.
Yeah.
And you do the red carpet stuff, and then one time we interviewed Suggs for Madness.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
I love Madness.
But yes, is there was a lot. There's quite a few occasions, and there's those moments of like, okay, I have to kind of keep this in. I've just got to get on with the job and be professional. Yeah. And I always say that, especially when we were doing the earlier interviews, they were all done on tape. And it was when I actually had to write down their names on the tape and the like little code that we had, made it real. It was like, I remember I just started to write Harold Ramis on the tape. I'm like, bloody hell. It's something about it, having to write that. But there was a lot. I mean, Dan Aykroyd, that was like one moment.
Are you asking generally or just on the film?
Both. I'm intrigued to know, you see. I always like to find out people's experiences.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it was, God, I'm going to mention his name again, George Clooney. That's, I think, the third time.
Blair, there's no problem with name dropping. I have no problem with that at all.
I've got a bad back.
Yeah, and he has to keep picking them up. I tell you why it was George Clooney for me, because we, as we sort of said before, we worked in IT, we lived in the southwest of England, so far removed from the film industry. We have no famous people connecting and opening doors for us or anything like that. And I got a job working for a company doing red carpet reporting. I just remember seeing George Clooney from dusk till dawn thinking, oh my God, he's absolutely gorgeous. And, I had a boyfriend at the time who was like getting all jealous and stuff. And you're like, that's ridiculous. He's Hollywood, and I'm an outpatient receptionist, which I think I probably was at the time. And then I go on and do IT and whatever, and then I decide to change my destiny. I end up working on the red carpet and interviewing George Clooney, and I think that was a huge pinch yourself moment, because because I changed my destiny. I was way in my mid-30s when I decided to up and go to London and pursue a completely different career. And there I am interviewing this guy that was so far removed from anything that I'd ever known in life, interviewing him, holding my own as an interviewer, as well as having a bit of a flirt, and just feeling very, like I'd held myself professionally. And that for me definitely was a big pinch yourself moment, that I feel that I had achieved something, because if I can change my destiny, then everybody can. That's how I feel about that, really.
Yeah.
But I think, just even generally, and I'm really not saying this as a cliche, but I really feel that it's been a privilege to do what I've done. We've had to work very hard, and we've had a lot of sacrifices. If you want a salary at the end of every month and you need that routine and that stability, then this isn't the life for you. We've had a lot of ups and downs and undulations, but I think not necessarily. And for me, I've always felt like we come in this world the same way and we go out the same way. And so I don't interview anybody, Tom Cruise, any differently to I'd interview, the pioneer in recycling that I did, many years ago. I treat everybody the same. And I think the huge pinch yourself moment for me wasn't about who we'd met or who we'd interviewed. It was when we stood at, we were at the BFI IMAX, we had our European premiere, and because I'd done so much red carpet, as has Anthony, we were used to being in that environment, and we know that it's Tom Cruise or Steven Spielberg that have their premieres at the BFI IMAX, not independent documentaries. And we were stood on the same stage as where they stood, doing a speech, and with a really large audience, with our film on the biggest screen in the UK. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that. No.
And we know that about Spielberg because we were a couple of months earlier. Yeah. This is where he screened Ready Player One, and he was stood exactly there. So we knew, and we were only a couple of rows away. It's like, this is weird. That was such a weird.
And we wouldn't even known at that point that we were even premiering it there. It was. I just remember jumping. I mean, literally leaping for joy when the BFI graciously allowed us to screen our film.
Yeah, that was there. And and even when you told me, I was like, that ain't gonna happen. It's like no. No, that's not going to happen. I ain't going to get myself worked up over this because it's just not. There's 100 things that can go wrong between now and then, and they were like, well, it was. They sort of like said, well, we've got this screen, and we've also got the BFI IMAX if that's of interest. Yes, it is. Thank you very much. And we're like, no. And I thought, no, they're not. This is going to be very different. And no, they now came off. It was a weird night in a very, very good way. It was just like this. Again, this just doesn't happen. Yeah. And we're there, and it's just like, and we're having to do interviews, and
the shoe was on the other foot. It was a dream. It was honestly, it was a dream come true.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I used to dream about going to an IMAX, but we lived down here, and there was no IMAXs. It was only in London. So the fact that within a few short years, I'd finally got to an IMAX to see a film there, to actually making something to it being premiered there. That was, It was one of those moments where a tear comes to your eye, and all the blood, sweat, and tears, and there have been blood, sweat, and tears. There was more to come after that.
And there was more to come after. We didn't know that at the time, and that is a whole other story. I really felt that we'd earned the right to, because it had been a very tough journey to get there.
And it's like, and we've said it a few times now that doing the doc for the most part has been a giggle. Yeah. Like saying about like the Dennis Muren thing, it led to like a couple of days later, driving up to San Francisco, interviewing Dennis Muren at ILM in the morning, and then the afternoon driving over to Pixar and interviewing Harley Jessup, who worked on GB2 as well. So it was just like in one day I'd been to Disney and to Pixar. Well, it was Disney, I suppose, but Pixar and ILM. It's like, what a weird.
I know, that was
this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen when you're sort of like tweaking away at computers, swapping out printer cartridges. So that was like one of those kind of moments. So you have all those kind of times. Yeah, we did this and we went there, and we haven't had any holidays for years really. No. But every trip we've done has been a working holiday. It's been fun, and we've done like the drive from New York to LA twice. Yeah. And when we've done interviews, and ours has been a direct route here. You've gone down or we've gone up, and we've done interviews up there, we've done interviews down there, and LA, and that's it. So you do all those things, and you have a bit of a laugh, and you enjoy it for that. But then there was all this other stuff that happened, all the like this post stuff that we had to do, and everything that kind of came afterwards to do with the distribution, which was really complicated. Yeah, it was really difficult to deal with. And you go through that, and it's like, right now, I think we can call ourselves filmmakers. Yeah. It's one thing when you're sort of like, he did a bit of this, we did a bit of that, and whatever, it's all part of the fun. But it's difficult. For me, it was just difficult to go, yes, well, I'm a director and all, and this, on that, when you've had such a laugh and everything has been a pleasure. It's when you have to go through the hard times. It's like, right, okay, now I understand the things that people have to go through to get their work out there. And ours, although I do think it was unique that some of the things that happened all on one project rather than being a variation of things happening on different projects, because that's normally what happens. We just seem to get everything in one go.
Yeah.
Like over the course of one thing and the other, it's unbelievable the stuff that was going on. And you were just like, but you get to the end and you're just like, but we can hold our heads up high and go, no, we bloody earned our stripes on that one, really did. So, and
we just feel very proud when you're sitting and you're sharing that with an audience. That's again another pinch yourself moment when you see people viscerally responding to your film. You know, they're laughing in the right places and they're gasping at the, you know, they're like, oh, can't believe that happened, you know, and you just feel, you know, and that is the beauty of being in a cinema, that collection of energy all responding. And we were just looking at each other going, oh my God, it was beyond our wildest dreams to see people react like that.
I mean, like again, I didn't think it was going to be a cinema scenario with the doc. You know, the best we was going to hope for, that was going to be like a special feature or something like that on the release of Ghostbusters. You know, there we were sat in this cinema, and you know, it's difficult because I'm watching it, waiting to see something happen, some kind of flick or mistake. And even though, you know, it's all gone through the special process of QCing and stuff, you're still waiting for something to go wrong. So that part of you is there, but when they start, first time in an audience that's outside of our direct circle of friends, that, you know, the most has been in the room is like me and Claire with a friend or something. It was just like, this is all going to go very well, and you know, half full of people in jumpsuits. So we're going to break their wands on your head when it all goes sour.
This is what we waited 12 years for.
We're in fire. No, they don't really work. Different.
And it is quite amazing seeing because I have been to conventions, I've covered stuff at them, I've met fans, but I've never ever met fans like Ghostbusters fans. It's the dedication is just brilliant.
It really is.
What was the event that you went to, that you said you went to an event?
For Ghostbusters, it would have been, it was probably like the second or third convention I think I'd ever been to. It was for the love of, would it have been for the love of sci-fi in Manchester?
We'd have probably been there.
Oh, that's
when Ernie was there. There was Ernie, Jennifer Runyan.
That's the one.
Yeah, we were there. We did the Q&A.
We did a Q&A
for it.
Yeah, I was probably I tried to get to Q&A, but I was stuck in a queue that I couldn't get out.
It was busy there, wasn't it?
That I remember them like they were really going nuts about. I mean, we were slightly lost. We ended up staying in the green room. Again, it was a weird experience because you're in there and you got William Shatner strolling in. And it's like, and you can hear as soon as he walks in, he's got a presence, and it's like you got bloody David Hasselhoff like
they couldn't get him off the stage, could they? They literally were like having to prise him off the stage. We were as our Q&A was running late because literally David Hasselhoff was like super glued to the stage.
Yeah, you couldn't get him off. You had there, and there was Ian McDermott, you had the Emperor, you had the fellow that had to play Boba Fett, and it was weird. And you just kind of sat there casually like, this happens every day, thinking, oh my God, this doesn't happen every day. This is so stupid. I can't be geeking out right now. I can't. But I remember that like people were not happy because they just the queues were huge. They couldn't get into places. It was. I think they've got better at organising that event now. But I don't know how many times they've done it. I mean, that was a great event though in terms of what they put on for the fans and stuff was fantastic. That orchestra that was playing.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like bloody hell, that's amazing.
And there was, I don't know if you would have been there, but they did a screening of it, of Ghostbusters.
That's right, they did. Didn't Ernie do an intro or something?
Ernie and Jen did it.
Yes.
And it was, that was a really cool experience to be part of, because I was there for that one. I met, people I've stayed friends with from being there.
Oh.
The other, I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to discuss with me. You were saying that the film went out and then there were issues afterwards. Are you able to talk about that? Do you want to talk about that? If you don't, it's okay.
I suppose what we can say, because it's public knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the sales agent that we had went bankrupt. So we
took our film with it.
And with everybody else's.
And they were the biggest
sales agent in the country. They represented Line of Duty, so a real heavy player in worldwide film sales.
and had a living moss wall.
Yes, they did.
On the reception desk on Shaftesbury Avenue. It was just like, it was moss with Q, and it was all very nice.
It was very nice, but they went bankrupt. So it was a bit of a legal battle to get our film back, which we did.
Yeah.
And that's probably about as much as we can really, sort of say. But that was.
I want to remember, to be quite honest.
Yeah, no, it was very stressful.
It is.
But our story was the same as potentially kind of hundreds or even thousands of different filmmakers that were, in the same problem. The other one that they represented was the Michael Jackson documentary. Yeah.
Is it Leaving Neverland or Finding? Yeah, Leaving Neverland. They did that. It was something like that, and they represented that. But they knew. Remember when we went in the office with them? They knew their stuff. Yeah. And I just thought, we're going to get swallowed up. We'll just be like another one in the catalogue and all the rest of it. And they literally did have a catalogue. Two, one for the films and one for documentaries.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But it didn't matter what page you could turn on. He could go, right, okay, well, that was such and he could rattle off. He knew that film, he'd seen it, and he'd worked, and so he knew, like, any film you could pick out of that. And it's like, that's really impressive. Yeah. And we'd met with others, and some are like, you meet with these people, you think, oh, great, what do you think of it? Oh, no, we haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, but, we're willing to do something. It's like, well, and that, because we a lot of the biggest push was, you got to make it 90 minutes. Yeah. And it was just, but it isn't. It's 2 hours, and it works like that, and that's what we edited it to. And I've tried to edit it down, and we did edit a shorter version, like 100-minute version, to make it for screenings and things like that.
And broadcast.
But it's but it is never to be used as like the version that we put out on disc or on iTunes or whatever. But it just bothers you. It's like, well, you can't. Well, we're going to. And some are just like, but it's difficult to sell that. It's like, we always had a plan A, which was, we'll make the DVDs or the Blu-rays and we'll sell it ourselves. We'll go to Comic Cons and we'll flog it. Yeah. So that was always there. So anything that anyone's going to say, well, if you don't do that, then it isn't a deal. It's like, okay, that's fine. It's not a deal. Thanks very much for your time. Yeah. Because, we've got other things to be doing. So it was, and it wasn't kind of an arrogance. It's just like, we've just got to play that. We weren't
prepared to compromise, were we?
We know the film, we know what works, we know what the fan base really want. Some of the fans wanted the 4-hour kind of cut, which was kind of what it was originally. So, but it's like, no, we're happy with it. It flows. It doesn't feel like it drags anywhere. And I've watched it a lot now. So, but it was always, if you can tell me where or what bit you don't like and blah, 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 I'm happy to address it and look at it, and nobody could ever give you an answer. It's like so it stays 2 hours. And they were very accommodating like that. And they were really impressive, but unfortunately, not impressive enough in some ways to make enough money, because they went bankrupt. And that was. Oh God, yeah. It was, nothing about that. And there was a point. No, it's all right. The rights will revert back to you, and it'll be fine. And it did not happen like that at all. And again, it's very difficult to deal with, especially that was 12 years of work at that point.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. That we were potentially losing everything.
Yeah, it was. All that work. It was like, what's going to happen now? And because you hear about this all the time, there's such and such. Remember that film they made? Yeah, it's like stuck on a shelf because they made it for Canon, and it's like now it's can't get distribution or something, and you're thinking, is that going to be us now? Yeah. And it's just like, seriously, you've got to get this fixed. It took ages to do.
It was very, very stressful.
So it was, but again, learned
from it,
and.
But you got there in the end. So I also want to ask, what made you choose Cleaning Up the Town? Obviously, it comes from a song within the film. But what made you choose that as the title?
Well, really, it kind of, they did clean up the town. Yeah. It was basically a kind of, it was one of those sort of, I suppose, sleeper films that were being made, that they made it with not expecting it to have the box office return that it did. So I think that was definitely one of the reasons why we called it.
How we came to it. I think we've thrown around different ideas about titles. I can't even remember what some of them were now.
Oh, we were going through hundreds of titles, but all the time it kept always coming back to this one. You know, it mirrors what happened in their life, and they cleaned up the town effectively, and you know with the success and financially, and you know the next film is Too Hot to Handle, remembering Ghostbusters 2, and the reason being is because at that point in the film, you know, in their careers, or in 1989 or 88 when it was probably made, can't even think now, 88, isn't it?
Ghostbusters. We started filming in 88. It was released in 89.
Yeah. So, but that was, you know, it was already it was hot property, and they had a lot to live up to. So, you know, had they, you know, was it too much to handle? In many ways. I quite
liked it. I always, cause I think it was just, I wanted to give more recognition to that particular track because it was just a great. And
we always really.
And I think it was like saving the day, and there was like, so there was. There were so much.
It was a celebration as well, wasn't it? You know, them cleaning up the town.
Yeah, exactly. So that was it, and I just can't remember the exact kind of eureka moment where it was just like that works, and I just remember having several conversations about it. I don't know. I mean,
I remember writing a list and thinking, you know, we'll call it something else. And all the time we just kept reverting back to cleaning up the town because everything it just felt right.
Yeah.
Now, Claire, you perfectly segued into what my next question was going to be, which is what can you tell me about Too Hot to Handle?
Ooh, well, I mean, we can already tell you that Randy Edelman will be composing the score. So the original composer of Ghostbusters 2 is joining us.
Yeah.
We are very, very excited to have him on board. And there we go. We're pinching ourselves there as well. So we're looking forward to working with him. And I think it's going to be a much easier film for us to make because there's, you know, with thanks to people like William Forsh, who was shooting at that point, lots of behind the scenes material and kind of just on his camera, which we never had in for Cleanin Up The Town. You know, they didn't do that on Ghostbusters, so we've got a lot more kind of archive material in that respect that we can use. So it's going to be a simpler film. I think it will be much different because it's a much different story to tell. But I do you know what, I think this one is probably going to be much more interesting.
Yeah, because there's not a lot on Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
And that's always been the biggest kind of problem. It was the thing I was really looking forward to when we was making, because it was originally as part of Cleaning Up the Town. It was just going to be one doc and that was it. And then while we were editing, after we'd come back from the Kickstarter kind of trip, and we're cutting it all together, it's just like there's no way we're going to get this down to like 90 minutes without sacrificing way more than I'm comfortable with. So why don't we make it? It was going to be like part one, Cleaning Up the Town part 1 and part 2, and then it was like, actually, let's just make it separate docs because it makes sense, and then it can be their own unique thing. And much the same way the Ghostbusters 2 is, because you can, as people have done, watch Ghostbusters 2 without seeing Ghostbusters. It works perfectly well as its own standalone film. So that's, and you know, same way we want to do with Cleaning Up the Town and make it look and feel like you're watching the original film again. We want to do the same with that. So it's like I've got ideas about a lot of things we can do kind of practically in terms of like intro and things like that, which I cannot wait to sort of like finally start getting a rig on with some of those things.
Getting your hands dirty, literally. And I think Derek Osborne as well, who is our motion graphics editor, and he did the animation towards kind of the end of the film, and he has done an outstanding job because he came on as our archive producer originally, and then he's done, you know, he's illustrated and just brought to life all that archive material in such an artistic way. But his film is Ghostbusters 2, isn't it?
Yeah, that was what he was always looking
so he can't wait to get his hands on doing the motion graphics. And
so he was doing, like, he's been doing all the first kind of pass at the end. I did one pass, so he's kind of doing a second pass, I suppose, but he kind of completely does his own thing. And we work very well because he has one way of editing, I have another way. And that's how we got Clean Up the Town Way, is because when we combine both of ours together, you know, bits that I might do that might drag or be too fast, he will have a way of either speeding up or slowing down, and vice versa. And then we end up getting this really nice rhythm with it. So, you know, and we just kind of looked at it at kind of like a rough cut or rough assembly really is what it is. And then it was just like, we do need to get a few more interviews, because we kind of miss a few of those kind of people, like the Jennifer Runyan and Steve Tash kind of popping up. So reached out to a few more people through lockdown. So just kind of waiting for the world to return to some kind of normality, where everything's still a little bit too nuts at the minute, and go out and do a few more interviews, and then that'll be it really. We can just dive in, and it won't be, apart from like everything we were talking about before, we can just circumnavigate so much of the aggravation that you end up getting at the end. We can make sure we are fully focused on that and have a bunch of stuff done before, so it just doesn't become another task to do. It's just something we just do on the side while we're doing it. It'll be easier. So I'm really looking forward to it. I can see a load of stuff in my head. It's just like, so we just got to get it out there. So so that's just it. Just need to get out, be able to get to the States, do those interview final few, and then that's it. Then we're off and running basically. We can add those into what we've got and know what we have, and then put in all the lovely motion graphics and things.
And of course, we've got Jason Reitman in the film as well. Which when we interviewed him, he was doing Up in the Air. He was an indie filmmaker that didn't do blockbusters. So funny how the world has changed.
Well, I'm champing at the bit for that, because Ghostbusters 2 is the first one I ever saw in a cinema. So I have real memories of real positive memories of that. I remember I was chatting to Ernie Hudson at the Manchester event. And he was saying how, for some, there's always a bit of a divide, isn't there? And I don't get it. To me, it's all Ghostbusters, it's all enjoyable, but there's supposed to be this divide between fans, between the first and the second. And he was saying how for some people it is like their fondest memory. And I love the first one. I love both of them, but I think the second one has a little bit of a place in my heart more, because it is the first one I ever properly got to sit and watch in a cinema. So any ideas when we're going to get Too Hot to Handle out, or am I...
Oh, no, that is a good question, and we definitely can't commit to that one, because
we don't know until we can get out to the States. If we have those interviews in the back now, I would imagine we would be sitting on something that would probably be at least 2/3 completed, but we're not. And it's kind of like that thing. There's only so much editing can you do. I know. I remember when
it was Randy Cook. It was Randy Cook.
I'd done a version. I'd done like first, whatever, how many passes in the dock at that point. And it was a Pterodog bit, and we hadn't interviewed Randy Cook. He was one that we just couldn't get hold of for whatever reason. So
I think Steve Johnson kind of like strong armed him. We were at another Monster Palooza event, and Steve Johnson, who as you know from the documentary, is a live wire, and he really is. He's amazing fun. Anyway, he kind of collared Randy Cook and just said, why haven't you done the interview?
Well, now you've backed me into a corner. And then he gave it, and then
poor bloke had relented in the end, and we wore him down.
I edited the Pterodog stuff. There was like a version of it, which I really must kind of revisit that, just out of my own sense of curiosity. And I thought, this is going to be a piece of cake. It's already done. All you got to do is drop him in, and that's it. And it was not easy at all, because he was the one who headed the Pterodog stuff. So it was a complete reconstruction. I struggled doing that for ages, months. I think I was at it for. I couldn't get the right kind of rhythm and flow. And somebody else even had a pass at it, and I think they did a version which was okay. But it wasn't until Derek kind of fully came on, and then we just again, we have to deconstruct it and reconstruct it again, and it was fine. And it's great when you've got, and like any kind of assembly down, because it really does help kind of focus the mind more when you can see something and you watch it over and over and you realize, okay, actually we don't need that. Actually, that's really, it may sound as though he's talking about different things. He's actually talking about the same thing. He's just saying it differently. And that all kind of comes down, and that's really where those original edits went from, like originally 5 hours to 4 hours to 3.5. It's about 3. It was like, and then down to the 2. It's just keep paring it down, and then it gets brutal. It's like what sequence needs to come out and stuff. But I remember that. So I'm always very hesitant to go, is this everything that we've got? Because if we've got to add people in, unless they're only going to be adding in a couple of little snippets here and there, I don't like doing too much editing because it's like otherwise you're giving yourself a load of work to what you'll just have to completely do over again once you get those interviews. So yeah, I think there might be 10. I think
10 or 10 more interviews. Yeah.
And that'd be great. And a few of them already agreed to it. We just got to get it all sorted. So we'll get that in, and that's it. So I think Cleanin Up The Town took. I'm trying to think how long it took. It was about 2 years.
Yeah.
From like Derek properly coming on board to like, which was like late 2016 to it was like 2 years. Like 2 years. So it's fair to say. So it could be about, but it could be easier. So it could be about 2.5 years. Could be a year. Could be 6 months. We don't know.
How long? Sorry, yeah.
You got me on the edge wanting that, but no, I do. I will say on the interview front, for me personally, one person that I still have on a list that I need to interview is Jennifer Runyan.
Oh, she's lovely.
She's absolutely wonderful, and we kept looking at getting an interview for me to do it, and for some reason we've never been able to pull it off. So that's one that I'm still hoping someday I will.
Yeah, and stick at it because she's really, really worth.
Yeah, she's
lovely.
She's
very sweet.
Yeah, she's got a great kind of energy with her.
Yeah.
And I was just, I'm buzzing because apart from being a student, she was in the pilot of Quantum Leap, and I was just like, this is just great.
I was telling her about that when I met her. I got to sign the Quantum Leap book Prelude, which is all about the first, that first episode, the pilot she was in. So I got to. But very, very cool stuff. So I'm going to obviously have to ask, you're doing the Ghostbusters documentaries for the first one, the second one. Could we see an Afterlife documentary in the future?
I know, everybody keeps asking us that.
I don't know. We'll have to see. I would like to.
Hopefully I'm not too old.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, as we said, we don't have kids ourselves. So, I
don't have any kids either. Not that I know of, anyway.
We can't do it we can't pass the baton like
I'd like to. I would even like the 2016 one, because that has a place in history and sadly for very different reasons. And whether you love it or hate it or like it, and I like it. I enjoyed the film when I saw it. It's not Ghostbusters as we knew it, but it's, to some people, they love that kind of film, and that's it. I don't mind them. I'm not a big fan of like the ad-libby kind of things. And Ghostbusters is sold so much. It's like, always ad-lib. It's kind of not the way that those kind of films are done. It's not they're a different kettle of fish. But it'd be interesting. I thought that maybe you could it's one, maybe two films you could combine, because that, the 2016 one does represent the beginning of a different era of that. And without that film, you wouldn't have got out Afterlife. Yeah. And because Jason said that at an interview, that it's like it kind of took the pressure off. Mm-hmm. So he could go, right, well, I could probably go ahead and make my own Ghostbusters film now because I'm not following on. But we'll see, because we don't know. The reviews are that it's a cracking film. But I mean, we got a lot of, we were in the whole reason we ended up going to Canada to screen it first was because there was a film festival happening there, and they were filming in Calgary. So it's like, so they just kind of combined it all in, and they wanted some of the crew there. And we met up with one of the producers. He couldn't make it at the time because he was still working, but he met us in a bar afterwards while I was drinking a Caesar.
Oh yeah, they're nice. They are
very nice. Some of the community there, the Alberta Ghostbusters, some of those worked on the film. So I don't know if it's common knowledge or not, to be quite honest, but I know that they had them there for, I think, for about a week doing some, because they all like insane about the detail about what a proton pack is or a ghost trap or whatever. So they did some work to make sure everything looked much more screen accurate than what they had. To be honest, I love the film, but I wouldn't probably tell the difference. But they have that kind of like eye to detail that's needed. So as things were happening at the time, so it would be nice to kind of try and do something in the future. But there would
have to be a passage of time, I think, because I think that what I've noticed is that, because we do a lot of interviews where people are promoting their film as it's being released, it's a very different experience to somebody who you're interviewing that's had 30 years in between, that's looking through rose tinted glasses and the kind of the halcyon days of filmmaking, or however you want to kind of put it. How many years has got to go by before we could interview Jason Reitman and have enough distance from it to make it retrospective?
Because it was, I remember I think it was at that Calgary screening, or maybe it was Calgary, maybe somewhere else, where somebody asked about getting the interviews as and, going up there and interviewing people.
That's right, yeah.
Because that's, that's going to be the trick. You get it while it's happening, like full tilt bleeding.
Yeah.
And so, but that's all very well if, as the filmmakers, you are 100% trusted, that you could open up about something, and if you're a little bit kind of like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, and say like Ernie, for example, if we'd have interviewed Ernie at the time of everything happening in Ghostbusters, and he knew us and just trusted, we would have had a very different interview with him then compared with what 25 years at that point had done for that, because it was quite, I think, traumatic. I think it's probably a word you could use for him at that point. But he had some perspective on it. So you can kind of... Yeah. It's difficult to know how the best interview you'll get. Yeah. And yes, you could sometimes get it raw while it's fresh in the mind and how they're feeling about it. And that's great to do. But also time does give a perspective on things. Yeah. Like, you know what, I might have said that then, but I didn't know about this and this that was actually happening over there, which was impacting them, which is why that happened like that. Yeah. So... it just can make it sometimes can be a much more pleasant kind of experience. And I don't want to make something where people's, the fear was, even when we were making this, was like, what if it was a miserable experience? What if these people actually are very nice? Yeah. It's gonna ruin something that's like a huge part of my sort of like childhood. But thankfully that didn't happen. No, we were very fortunate. So I think that, we could do a retrospective on it now because it was finished years ago. It hasn't even come out yet. I think for that, I'd love to be asking Jason, like, with the pandemic, how did that impact him as a filmmaker? What could he then go and do? How did it impact the film? Did it's like, oh, well, we've got loads of time, let's refine it, let's tweak it a little bit more and really iron out all the kinks? Because that, we did with the doc, there was many times we tried to give ourselves deadlines. We've got to do it for then, the 25th coming up, the 30th coming up, this is going to be happening, that's going to be happening. It's just the right time, and you kind of partly put that pressure on just so you can try and force yourself over to that finish line. Yeah. But the beauty is that we, in the end... Well, who'd have thought when we finished it that there was going to be a Jason Reitman film coming out around the corner? I mean, talk about, it's just destiny, divine timing, the universe kind of aligning the film when it was meant to be released. Yeah. It feels a bit like that, really. So, yeah, who knows? We'll see.
I will keep my fingers crossed on that one. That'll be the one when I keep hoping will happen. If you could give advice to anybody who wanted to go into your line of work, what would it be?
Don't give up the day job.
I asked Mark Steenson, who is a writer on a film that's come out recently called Jacob's Wife, a horror film. I said, what advice would you give to a writer? And he said, don't do it.
I think everyone's all like, no. What are you doing? My advice is that if you're going to do something, be passionate about it and give it your all. Because if you're not going to, you line yourself up for disappointment. And we work with a lot of different people at varying times. I said, well, we're going to give it a year. It's just like, okay, there are those that I'm sure have said that and they've gone on to do great things. But I've yet to meet any of those people. If you're not that committed, because this is a huge commitment. And I work with all kinds, and some are quite happy. I do corporate work as well, and I can't say that I love doing that kind of stuff, because I don't really. It's great. It can be fun, but it isn't the same as this. Not by a long shot. And you can get kind of caught up in that kind of trap. It's like, when I gave up a good job and a good wage and all that kind of stuff to pursue something else. And if you end up kind of falling back into that way, but I don't know, it's just, I think, if you want to do the kind of thing that we do, it's really what we do is passion projects. Yeah, it is. And that is just, everything's got to come from that. It's like, and it could be a film, it could be a short or a doc or whatever, or retrospective making of. You just got to kind of give it your all and be prepared to do that. And if you think it's sort of like you want to give it 1 or 2 years, then really don't. You'll waste your time and you'll waste other people's time, because you've got to be in it for the long run, haven't you? Yeah, because these type of things that we've done would normally take a huge amount of resources, which means a huge amount of money. Yeah. And unless, as people have said to us, to be an independent,
To be an independent filmmaker, you need to be independently wealthy.
Yeah, and there is a lot of truth to that. And it's not to say that people who aren't wealthy can't do it, because they can.
Yeah.
But just know that it won't be that. No, we're not. Not at all. It's like we're currently sat in my old bedroom. So, you can't exchange any of those or trade any of those experiences in. It's
that's also true. I mean, I can only really echo Anthony what he said. If you're gonna do it, then you've just got to be committed from the beginning to the end and never give up, and always kind of keep continuing to believe. I think for most of us that go down this road, it isn't. It's a calling. It has to be in your life, because without it being in your life, there's something kind of missing.
Yeah.
It is the air that you breathe. It's those. I mean, it's quite addictive, really, to be honest, to be to the experience the things that we've done.
Yeah.
But and the other thing, and I really hope that we have always done this, is look after everybody that we've worked with, and respect the people that we're interviewing, respect the people that we're working with. Anthony and I are a team. Anthony's at the helm of it in the sense that he's the director, and I'm the producer of it. However, I would like to think that we've treated everybody as an equal. We've treated them with respect, and we value everybody's collaboration, and we recognise that we're not an island, and we wouldn't be here without Derek, Osborne, Anthony's art, Derek and Jamie and Dave, because they've got their MIDI D and Jamie.
Yeah,
I don't think that's what. Anyway, they're just the sort of core people that worked on the film. Without Sam Ciccarello, who lent us locations and supported us in many ways out in the United States. The Kickstarters that contributed and give us their hard-earned cash to enable us to help get it didn't actually get us over the finishing line, but at least contribute towards that, and and everybody that's gone out and bought the film. And I can only really stress that if you watch the film, please tell your friends, your family, your colleagues about it, because if you don't spread the word, the film can't be a success. But I'm hoping, I think it's, if anything, I would say to people, treat everybody with respect.
Yeah, it is, because it doesn't, it might be easy, but it doesn't always happen.
No.
And people are very blinkered, especially, and it is, because it does take a lot to do these type of things. But I've certainly worked with enough people to go, well, what about, this, that, and you haven't mentioned, and you do meet some very strange people when you work within media and the film industry.
Yeah.
You really do. And not to say that it's unique to that, because we've certainly met a fair few of them when we've done other jobs.
Yeah.
I worked at my dad's restaurant for a while, and like catering, crikey Moses, that breeds them. But you do, you always respect those people that have done stuff, and not to say that'll always be reciprocated, I hasten to add, but it shouldn't mean that you then go on and treat people any differently. So, but it's great, you have those, like those dark times and stuff like that. But you remember the times when you sat at Industrial Light and Magic on George Lucas's boardroom and sort of like, hey, look at this, let's make another Star Wars, I believe was my words, and you just like,
aren't you sorry you said that?
Yeah, that's all my fault. All of it is my fault.
That's a whole other conversation.
But it's incredible, and very privileged to kind of be in those kind of situations.
Yeah.
But then you realise when you meet some of these people that they are, for the most part, really decent, down to earth, and very personable, and they wouldn't be able to do their job if they weren't. And that's the reason why these films probably have endured in the way they are, because of these people and their personalities have kind of shone through. And you kind of see that, and you hopefully learn from it and think, well, if I want to do that, then I know that's the kind of person that I would like to be, and hopefully am. But we'll soon find out in the coming years.
Well, I cannot thank you enough, the pair of you, for taking the time to speak throughout this. It has been entertaining, and it's also been educational for me and the listeners. So it's been really enjoyable. So what I always end with is, I think we've been talking of celluloid codswallop. So I will say a big thank you to you, Anthony, and to you, Claire, and just thank you so much. And we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you very much, and
Thank you
for
very much.
having us, and thank you for listening.
Yeah,
as well,
and your time.
yeah, thank you for your time. Absolutely.